16 hot dogs, 16 days, and 16 stories. This is 16 for 16. I'm Mary Bowers, a Korean-American adoptee and competitive eater. I'm getting ready to step onto the biggest stage in all of world sports, the Nathan's Famous Hot Dog Eating Contest at Coney Island, New York. And this time, I'm bringing some friends along to share their stories. Meet Chae, a Korean-Australian adoptee and storyteller. Let's catch up and answer the question, what is a family? I am here with Chae. Your introduction to the world. Tell the audience about yourself. Who are you? Where do you live?
Thanks so much, Mary. My name is Chae. My Korean name is Youngnam Soo, and I was born in Korea in 1991, April 7th, supposedly. And I was adopted to Queensland, Australia, where I lived up until I was about 10, and then moved to Western Australia and have been living in Western Australia for the most part of the last 20 years since then.
So you said supposedly your birthday is April 7th. Let's talk about that a little more. There are some questions around birthdays. It sounds rather cool because I have multiple birthdays. It is not as cool as people think. Cake, extra presents. And I'm like, yeah, not that cool. Why is April 7th a presumed date? And what are some of the questions that maybe the TRC is investigating in relation to that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. You know, when I only first started coming out of the adoptee fog, as adoptees refer to it, about 2 years ago. And when I started looking into my adoption and adoption from Korea, I had no idea around some of the falsified documents. I had no idea around things like our birthdays or our medical information potentially being incorrect or falsified. So the process of learning about that was incredibly challenging. For me at this point in time, I have no idea whether April 7th is actually my birthday or not. When I hear stories from other adoptees who, like yourself, have found inconsistencies or have multiple birthdays, it's the uncertainty that, okay, is this my birthday? Is everything that I know about myself actually not true? That's the hard part. So for me, I don't know if April 7th is actually my birthday. I like to believe that there's some truth in that, but I have no idea.
Okay, so then Chae, explain for non-adoptees who might be listening to us today, why don't you just pull your original birth certificate to verify?
Yeah, well, for the longest time, up until about 6 months ago, I actually didn't have any of my original documentation. I just had a single birth certificate in English from my adoption agency, Eastern Social Welfare Society, formerly Eastern Child Welfare Society. And that document had no records of my family, just had 7th of April, 1991. And I didn't know that there was anything more than that birth certificate that I had until I learned from other adoptees that there's more, right?
Surprise! Yes. So in my case, I have at least 2, probably 3 birth certificates. So I have the same birth certificate that you do from Eastern, and it's quite strange. Mine says that my parents are unknown and my birth date is a presumed date. However, elsewhere in the documents, it lists the names of 2 people, their ages, their hometowns, and their family history, which is a lot of detail for somebody who's an orphan. So that's birth certificate number 1. Birth certificate number 2 is the amended birth certificate that I received when I went to the US. It has my adoptive parents' names on there, and it looks exactly the same as if my adoptive mother had given birth to me. That kind of becomes problematic when I go to a doctor and they ask for things like family medical history. I don't have access to that information. They can't turn around, ask my biological parents. But on the other hand, like my adoptive parents' medical histories were not changed through that process. So I find it very interesting that I have this record that says my adoptive mom gave birth to me, and yet her records do not say the same. It's quite the story to try and resolve, even just logically in my brain. If you could create your own ideal birthday, what would it look like?
I think, when it comes to birthdays, I can't remember the last birthday that I had where, yeah, there weren't a lot of sort of negative sort of feelings that I had around that. You know, every time that it leads up to my birthday, it's one of the most difficult days of the year for me. For me, it's hard to look past the fact that this is the day that, yeah, I came into the world. And it's a reminder of what happened and the separation from my birth mother. I think for me, if I was to think around, yeah, the ideal birthday for me, it would be surrounded by a lot of my friends and family that I love. There would be lots of cake.
What is your favorite kind of cake?
I think I like a traditional chocolate mud cake, or
Okay.
yeah, or a black forest cake. That's a thing, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice choice. Nice choice. What about fairy bread, but with a twist? Like, what if you could have fairy bread made by actual fairies?
Oh, that would be amazing. I imagine that you'd go to a amazing location out in the jungle somewhere, and there would just be little fairies making fairy bread, and they welcome you into their world.
Do
And
you
you
think they live
partake in the
inside like
fairies.
mushrooms or trees?
Well, I think definitely
Or
mushrooms.
maybe flowers. They could live inside flowers.
Yeah.
I think with adoptees, it's like sometimes when things get really, really difficult, I know my coping mechanism for that has always been just to imagine myself somewhere else in some sort of hypothetical, like fantasy situation. What are some of your creative outlets, your coping mechanisms, whether they're healthy or not? What are some of the ways that you've found yourself reacting to some of those harder moments?
You know, I've definitely had a lot of probably maladaptive or unhealthy coping mechanisms over the years. I think a big one is fitness and working out at the gym. I do a lot of sort of bodybuilding style working out, and it's a place where I can just put my headphones on and just focus on my body and what it's doing and how I'm moving and how things feel. There's a sense of mindfulness that happens for working out. It's also, I think, for me, a level of comfort. You know, I know that I was very uncomfortable with my body, or had in my mind, there was a disconnect between my Asianness and how I felt. And that was something that I couldn't control. So, you know, finding working out at the gym, that was something I could control. Yeah, something I could change about myself. So I fell into that. And for me, relationships and work.
I think consistently I could probably check that box that just says it's complicated and never change my status.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I realized I was polyamorous when I was in my early 20s. And, you know, that made a lot of sense to me. You know, I think in hindsight now, looking back, you know, in the way that I sort of viewed love, right? If I could choose the people that I love, it just didn't make sense to me that, you know, we just had to love one person. You know, the concept, you know, for us adoptees, when you think about us having multiple parents, right, or multiple sets of families, the concept of loving multiple mothers or multiple fathers, when it came to romantic partners, that also just made sense to me as well. Part of that for me, when things were getting really tough with the TRC and, you know, other aspects of my life, I would definitely pour into my relationships, and it would allow me to not focus on myself. If I was with someone, then I could invest all of my energy and all of my emotional capacity into somebody else without having to worry and think about myself.
What about some of those conflicting messages though? Because I feel like there's almost this narrative that you have to push against the status quo of loyalty. If we love both families, we're being disloyal to one or the other. There's this concept of you have to choose one person to be loyal to forever and ever. Where I feel like for me, it's like, well, no, from birth, this demand has been placed on me. So how do you resolve some of those conflicting narratives that we're kind of swimming against the tide?
Yeah, you know, I think a big part of that is making sure everyone is happy and their needs are being met. I think we as human beings, I have the belief that we have an infinite capacity to love. And when I think around why I'm here and the life that I would want to live, I want to live a life that encompasses that love.
I feel like I know I care about my family and friends a lot, but I also know my own limitations. And there are certain times where I'm like, God, I feel like I want to help. I feel like I want to be there, but I do not have the tools or the skill set to give them what they need. And so I think the more we expand our relationships, the more we expand our definition of what constitutes a family, what constitutes a romantic relationship, or any of the connections that we have, it lifts a lot of the heaviness of, I don't know how to help you, because there's always somebody else that does have that ability, that skill set, who is somewhere in the mix.